Hi, I'm Chris Baer, the director of CASA of Carson City, the CASA organization that advocates for abused and neglected children in the child welfare system here in Carson City. I'm here today at Access Carson City, the television station, on It's Your City. And I'm going to be talking to you about those children and about how you can make a difference for those children. And there's a couple ways. First off, let's talk about what CASA does. CASA stands for Court-Appointed Special Advocate. CASA volunteers volunteer to serve as guardian ad litem in a child welfare court case. The law states that someone trained from the community will be the child advocate in that case. A child is abused or neglected, and if it's serious enough, the state takes that child into care. Often, the state will attempt to work with a family with the child still in the home, but if it's serious, that child enters the child welfare court case. And the parents, most of the time, get a case plan, things to do in order to reunify and get their child back into their care. In that court case, the law says, there will be a volunteer from the community, ordinary people, trained, fingerprinted, background checked, interviewed, who serves as the child advocate and advocates for that child's best interest. What's best interest? Best interest means it's not necessarily the child's wishes that the advocate is stating. While the advocate is asked to relay what the child wants, the advocate is there to state to the judge and advocate in the system for what they, as the child advocate, think is best for that child. That's information and advocacy that's additional to what everyone else is doing. There's attorneys, social worker, parents, and others who may be present in a court hearing on this child's future. And they all will have their input to the court. But the child advocate has a very special role. We ask that people who volunteer to be a CASA volunteer really stick with that case and stay with that child. It can take a year or two for this court case to work itself out and for the court to ultimately make a decision. What will be the safe, permanent home for that child? Now you might say, well, it's abuse and neglect. They should never go back to their parents. But that's not what we do. The law says, and it makes some sense, that the parents have a right to work a case plan most of the time and change, real change, rigorous, monitored change. Change the way they parent, change the way they may be living their life, and have that child returned to their custody. And very often that does happen. But there are 4 permanent safe homes possible. One is that the parent works their case plan, makes real change, and the child is reunified with them. The child goes home again, and the case is over, and everyone steps back, and the family goes on with their lives. Another possibility is that the parent doesn't. The parents do not, and their parental rights are terminated, ended in court, and the child is up for adoption and adopted. Child goes on to a safe, permanent home. It's also possible that a guardianship is created. The parents retain their parental rights, but a guardian takes the child into their care and the case is closed. And finally, sometimes children are older, maybe 16, 17. When they turn 18, they age out. They leave the child welfare system, they leave foster care, and they're adults. And so that's the 4th possibility. So this is a way in which people from the community can participate in a court case and in the lives of abused and neglected children whose stories you will never hear. These are confidential stories about these children and these parents. They happen within the system. They happen in the court system. CASA volunteers enter that system, agree to confidentiality, cannot discuss the details, the names, anything about the case, and you don't read these stories in the newspaper. You might say, well, that sounds interesting, not sure that's something I can do. But I want you to think and remember these kids. I want you to think and remember that in Carson City, as in other communities, abuse and neglect of children does take place. You might read in the newspaper. so-and-so arrested for child endangerment, or so-and-so arrested for child abuse. And that might be all you hear. Well, what happens after that? There may be a brief criminal case for that parent or guardian, but the child welfare case may be going on without it ever being mentioned in the press, and may go on for years, a year or two. So being a CASA volunteer is one way of helping. Another way of helping, we have a critical need for foster homes in Carson City. We have too few foster homes. Why is that so important? Well, often these children will be placed with a relative. That's the preference. If grandma is able to take care of the 5-year-old, and it's safe, she checks out, or grandma and grandpa, or the aunt and the uncle, or the sister, that's great. If family can do it, that's preferred. But suppose they can't. And little Johnny or Susie is going to school here in Carson City at one of our grade elementary schools, or the middle school or the high school. If we don't have enough foster homes here in Carson City, there's no choice. And there's a foster home placement available in Fernley or Dayton or Minden. Not that these are bad places, but that child now has to leave their school, their friends in their school, and they're further away from their parents. If we're trying to work with the parents and encourage the parents to make real change, and the child has an interest in seeing their parent. Just because you're abused and neglected doesn't mean you don't love your parent and aren't missing them. So, having foster homes right here in the community makes a big difference to these kids, and we don't have enough. What could you do? Well, you might say, I can't be a CASA volunteer and I can't be a foster parent, but there's something you can do. You can talk to your friends. You can tell them. I heard Chris Bear, the CASA guy. I heard him on Access Carson City and the It's Your City program. He says we need CASA volunteers. And I thought about you, my friend. And I thought, this is something you've been talking about wanting to volunteer. Or you've talked to me about being a foster parent. You could get a hold of CASA and they'd help you find the people who at the state who do the licensing and training for foster parents. And we will. CASA of Carson City. Our phone number is 882-6776. We'll get it on the screen here. And our email is casaofcc@earthlink.net. You can email us, you can call us. We'll put you in touch with the state people who work to recruit foster parents. And we'll talk to you about being a CASA volunteer if you're interested. So what can you do? Well, remember these kids. Don't forget these kids. These kids are all around us all the time. They're in our schools, we hope. They're here. We keep them in the community. They look like other kids. You can't tell them apart. They didn't do anything wrong. They didn't choose to have this happen to them. And we have an obligation to try to take care of them. All of us do. So you can help. There's things you can do. Finally, we have a foster kids closet down at the CASA office. We take donations of clothing. It needs to be clean. You need to wash it. Kids sizes 0 to 18. We have kids with size 13 feet. Kids' shoes. New shoes only, but good quality used clothing. And we put in our foster kids closet because sometimes kids come into care with no clothes. Well, the clothes on their backs. And we have social workers and CASA volunteers, parents, foster parents, sometimes with the kids, sometimes just coming in. And we just give them the clothes. We just say, take them. It helps us support foster parents, helps us support the CASA volunteers and the social workers, and it helps us provide something that is often needed for kids who come into care. And I see kids with big smiles when they get a new pair of shoes, and they get to pick them out themselves. And it's very low stress in the foster kids closet for them to do this. It works for all the adults and the kids as well, really well. So there's things you can do. You can make a difference for these kids. I always worry if I say abused and neglected children that people will run the other direction, that people will just automatically be frightened or hurt or crying, because we all care about kids so much. And I think that's somewhat normal, but I think we got to get beyond that, and I think we have to do things. I think we have to care for these kids. I often say You know, it really is about clean underwear and good shoes and having adequate clothing and the day-to-day work of raising a child. That's something we should never forget. So I encourage you to do some work out there. Tell your friends about being a CASA volunteer. Go to our website. Tell your friends and talk to your friends who may have an interest already about being a foster parent. You can help these kids, and I want to thank you for listening all the way through today. I'm Chris Bear with CASA of Carson City, and it's your city. Thanks for being a great neighbor. Take care.